Well-being is extremely important. It's not just in your performance and in work, it's in your relationships, it's in your physical health, your longevity. There are many places where in our culture, people are starting to recognize that well-being is very key. So this has been really exciting. So I thought of that go-get-it attitude, that appreciation for challenge, that enjoyment of putting in effort and persisting is really apparent to me in Montessori students.
Welcome to Now What Podcast with Yogi Patel. And today we're talking all about Montessori. And we have Paula Preschlack with us today. She is an author of Montessori Potential, Montessori Student, and much more. Welcome to the podcast, Paula.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Paula, I remember as a head of school in San Diego for an AMI school, I had every book written by your mother, and I think your mom and sister also wrote one book together, and every Montessori book. However, these books were lifesavers for us, for teachers, and for parents. Because in our library, when there was a question or a parent didn't know as much about Montessori, we were able to say, please check out this book, read a little bit more about it. And then when we have parent educations, everything began to gel for them. So tell us a little bit about the journey of how you ended up in a Montessori school.
In a Montessori school. Well, I went to Montessori school when I was very young. I went to a school in Illinois for 3 to 6. It was one of the only ones around at the time. I didn't really think about Montessori again until my mother and sister, Lynn Jessen, started Forest Bluff School when I was maybe in 8th, 9th grade. I didn't really pay much attention, but I knew that was their big project, and I watched them do that. And then I went away for high school and college and so on. So I didn't really notice much of what was happening at the school, although I did work there one summer and just helped out with, I think I made all of certain materials. So I kind of remember making the materials a little bit for them. And I remember they made me wear a skirt, which as a teenager was just kind of thought it was so serious. After college, stumbled into taking the Montessori training. I won't go into the whole story. And when looking for a job, found that the best offer was at Forest Bluff School, the school that my mother and sister founded. So I thought I'll just come for a couple years and then I'll go somewhere else that I really want to be. But I just fell in love with it as soon as I started working there. So I worked there for a very long time, a few decades, and just loved it. I taught primary, I taught lower elementary, and I led the parent-child series for people with children under age 3. So I took all 3 of those trainings with AMI and then was head of school for many years. So that's where I've spent most of my time, at that Montessori school, and really found it to be an incredible experience.
So your book, Montessori Potential, fills the gap. It includes so many practical experiences, examples, both for parents at home and for folks at school. Can you tell us, in writing this book, what motivated you to write the book, first of all, because you were in the school teaching at this time, or out of school at least?
I was very busy. I kept finding over the years that people were asking the same questions, that I heard fellow educators saying the same things. There were certain themes that just kept coming up in Montessori again and again. I kept seeing these amazing results with these children who went through Montessori when they were older, and seeing them as young adults and just knowing what they were like when they were young, working with them and their families, and seeing them reach this incredible potential as a person just over and over and over, and thinking everybody should have this, wanting to be able to explain to people that this was happening, why I think this is happening, be able to explain Montessori through that lens. So I was really compelled to write a book to address the frustration that people seem to express of constantly answering the same questions and thinking the same things. If only we could tell people how great this is. And my mother's books and my sister Angelin's book on research are powerful, but it felt like a different time and place and a time to tell people why right now Montessori meets the needs that we have in our culture, which is to help young people be brave about taking chances, be able to work together with others, be more entrepreneurial, be able to think outside the box, to be adaptable. And I saw that Montessori graduates are doing this. So I wanted to explain why. So that's why I wrote The Montessori Potential.
Yeah. So as a Montessori head of school or just an author, when you speak to others, it's not quite easy because Montessori has so much depth to it. Mm-hmm. What are some of the misconceptions? Just, there are many, but what are one or two that we could explain on this podcast so folks can understand some aspects of Montessori clearer?
I mean, it's hard to say to me personally what might be common misconceptions because I'm actually really amazed that 10, 15 years ago, when I was asked on an elevator, what do you do? And I mentioned Montessori, some people didn't know what that was. And now it's pretty rare that someone asks me what it is. So I think that more people have a better idea of what Montessori is and have heard of it than ever before in history. Sometimes they think that Montessori involves more freedom than they're comfortable with, or that it's very rigid. Those are two comments that I hear. And I think that those and other misconceptions come from limited experience with a Montessori school that may not be very authentic. People can use the word Montessori and do anything they like. It's not trademarked in any way. People have such a variety of experiences with what they think might be Montessori.
Yeah, I think that was one of the questions that I often get is, what do they do in Montessori school? Or Montessori school is seen as a place where they're not really learning many things. But Montessori classroom is filled with experiences that you spoke about. So maybe we can talk about the classroom and what it has to offer.
Yeah, well, I would say if someone were to ask me really quickly, can you just tell me what Montessori is? I have found a solid way to answer that question in my mind is it's the only approach of education that I know of that meets children's developmental needs and characteristics at each age and stage of their lives. It's the only one that really truly matches what we know from research about how human beings learn. Children learn by touching things. They need to be moving. They need to be communicating. They need to be exploring. They need to be supported in becoming more independent. It's an inner drive that they have. So there's certain things that we know about human development and the ways that human beings learn. Montessori matches that very deliberately at each age and stage. And because human beings have not changed over the centuries in our needs, Montessori doesn't need to keep changing to meet those needs on a very basic level. I don't mean, every child's going to be a little different and you're going to need to be flexible. But on a basic level, human beings learn by touching with their hands, learn by looking and interacting, learn from each other, and so on. We don't learn by sitting still, being strapped in, and having visual stimuli and just listening to a lecture and then being asked to perform. We know from experience and from studies that that's not the best way for children to learn. That usually makes sense to people. And then right away, their minds start to go to what that might look like. What might that look like? It looks like a classroom where all the furniture is really small, down at children's level. They can get to the materials. They can take activities off the shelves and engage in them. The teacher goes around and helps them. Children are allowed to interact with each other. So many features of Montessori start to make sense to people when they understand that that's where it's coming from It just sets the stage for people to understand it. They typically get very enthusiastic and ask lots of questions.
So with Montessori education, how does it go beyond? So it could be applied in the classrooms, home, and in the social context, including leadership, right? So we're teaching children a variety of skills. Can you speak about how this preparation begins?
I don't even think so much of teaching children skills as setting up the environment and living in it, and they learn skills that are right for them. Each individual is different on their different path and interacting with different personalities in the classroom and drawn towards different activities. And Maria Montessori really had noticed that children are typically drawn towards the very thing that that individual needs. It's important to allow children to go on their certain paths of interest. And we know that, we know from research that people learn best when they're allowed to follow their interests, right? That interest-driven learning is very effective.
I think one of the things that pops up for me as we were just talking about this is you talked about the materials that are laid out in a classroom. So maybe we can talk about how mistakes are seen or grading or testing in traditional versus Montessori. How do children see where they need to make adjustments?
Such a good question. It's one of my favorite things about Montessori is that in traditional school or conventional school, we see the child as a person who needs to be given information, and then we test them to see if they absorbed it. And we want them to give us the answer to the question with the information that we've given them. And so tests are really designed for, choosing a certain answer, not necessarily coming up with an original answer. So we're really training our children in an unconscious way towards not being so original or brave about making mistakes. They're praised for coming up with the same answer that they were told already. So it's really a memory retrieval game. Whereas in Montessori, the child is shown how to use a material. They use these physical materials again and again. They might use this math material in such a way that they then find the answer to their problem, to their math problem. If they make mistakes in the process of using that material, which mirrors the abstract process that we do in math, it's the same, it's just physically laid out. They then find that they have the wrong answer. They can go back through the process on their own with the privacy on their own and figure out where they erred. They don't need an adult to come and tell them that they're wrong. And I think that's really key because you think about, I went to traditional school, conventional school, all through grade school, and the experience of constantly being told, you're right, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're right, you're wrong, you're right, you're right, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, is really, it's harsh. I mean, I don't think as adults, we really enjoy that very much. And for a child who's really sensitive and who's building their personality, it's a very harsh thing that we do to ourselves. And we do this over and over and over in our culture and sort of think of it as being normal. We think of it as being the way we learn. We think of it as being school. It doesn't have to be. For someone, when I see these children work with materials and find where they went wrong, and sometimes they went wrong in multiple places, and sometimes they'll fix one thing. They'll still end up with the wrong answer. They'll go back and they'll do that thing correctly and then find another mistake that they made. When they finally, sometimes after 2 hours of working with a friend, going through a math problem, they find the way to do the whole process correctly on their own. Not only are they much less likely to forget again, they understand processes then to picture it abstractly. When they're doing math abstractly, they can really picture all the parts of a process. But the way they feel about themselves is, I've got this. I know how to fix my mistakes. It's not a big deal. It's not shameful. I don't need somebody else telling me. No one's looking at me and making a big deal out of this. It's just for me. And I know I can do it if I keep trying. That sets up a whole different mindset for life. I see these graduates go into college and into the workforce beyond, and they are so gutsy about things that they will try to do, but they will persevere until they get it. They will keep doing things until they get good at it. They will try things that are something that they're not considered adept at, and they will become very proficient at it. And they take pride in that, and they enjoy the process. They enjoy the process of getting things wrong and keep going until you get it right. We should all be like that. That's so much more. I mean, talk to anybody who's hiring a young person, and they would be thrilled to find somebody who has that persistence and that attitude and doesn't need to be coddled, doesn't need to be praised, doesn't need a lot of attention for what they did or didn't do well. They just will do the job and enjoy it. And it's interesting. I've been reading. So my sister Paula Lillard is writing a new book. And so that should come out in the next 18 months to 2 years. So it's very exciting. It's about the research that's been done specifically in Montessori. There are maybe over 2,000 research studies that have been done over time, which is pretty substantial for any one topic, right? So we're really excited about this. And one of the most compelling areas of research is in the topic of well-being. When people are older and they report how they feel about themselves, their confidence, their outlook on life, their well-being scores coming out of Montessori are much higher than in traditional or Waldorf or anything else in these studies. One of the biggest deciding factors, or one of the features that researchers look for, whether a person seeks out challenge. And when a person seeks out challenge, that's considered a very good indicator of well-being. You feel confident, you're not too worried, you enjoy challenge, you believe that you are going to be able to get better at something if you put effort into it. It's a really good indicator for well-being. Well-being is extremely important. It's not just in your performance and in work. It's in your relationships. It's in your physical health, your longevity. There are many places where in our culture, people are starting to recognize that well-being is very key. So this has been really exciting. So I thought of that go-get-it attitude, that appreciation for challenge, that enjoyment of putting in effort and persisting is really apparent to me in Montessori students.
In comparison to other schooling, Montessori education definitely invites the child, the student, to reach their potential, whatever that might be, at their own pace with guidance. The book that you wrote, the title, Montessori Potential, speaks volumes. Can you speak about how we are trained as Montessori guides to aid to this particular children's, every child's own potential? What does that mean, their potential?
Right. It's a bit of a catchy word sometimes. And I think it is really, it's a great question. So I think it's important to think about. Maria Montessori herself talked about teachers trying to train ourselves to envision the child who is not yet there. So when we look at a young child who's struggling or who is behaving in a certain way that maybe isn't optimal, that we not react so much to what is in front of us, but we really try to have faith and belief in the person that we know that child could probably be. So it's taking the long view, which I love, especially for parents. I think it's really powerful to take the long view. Picture your 4-year-old as a 40-year-old. They're probably not going to be like they are right now. So taking the long view, having a positive approach, treating the child as if they are capable of the things that you're asking is so, so important. But the other aspect of this that Montessori talked about a lot was not imposing on the child what you think they should be, this potential that you're picturing. You can envision that there is this better person inside this child or more capable or whatnot, but you're not going to hold them to that. You know that every single moment they are creating themselves. So one of the big paradigm shifts, I think, for us as parents and as teachers when we come into Montessori is to stop thinking of the child as something that we need to mold and shape and teach, but to respect that the child is forming themselves, that there's a creative process going on. This person is building a person, and it's not our job to do that. In fact, you can't do it for them, even if you wanted to. So our position is to step to the side and aid the process, support them to do this, but really lift them up to be able to do the job and stay out of their way. We're talking about potential in terms of taking the long view, having faith in the child that isn't there yet, and also allowing that potential to go wherever it's going to go, because you just don't know. And one of the reasons I chose this title is I did keep finding myself that word slipping out over and over, because so often, even though I was a Montessori trained educator, I did believe in all my students. Well, the greatest compliment I ever got was that a person told me that her daughter in high school commented on me as a teacher, that when she'd been in my class in elementary school, she said that I made her feel like she could do anything. And it makes me tear up. It is really, to me, that was like the most important thing it could possibly do for a young person. I am still amazed when I hear what graduates are doing. I still am surprised because I didn't know they could do that. And I just love that delight. And I don't know if they knew what they could do, but nobody ever stopped them and told them they weren't good at things or they couldn't do things. They were realistic about their abilities. They noticed in each other and in themselves who was more adept at certain things. But in Montessori, I think they just keep experiencing that there aren't these limits, that we don't know what we can do and we can go further. Your work is your own and you're creating yourself. So I think it's just so positive and inspiring. And that word potential kept coming up for me. So the other little part of the title, which we talked about the other day, is that Montessori itself has so much potential that we have not reached, I don't think, as a society. Some schools are much closer to reaching the full potential and they're always working on it. But for so many Montessori schools, they're so far from coming close to the potential of what Montessori can do because they're holding back from going all the way. And you and I have talked about this. It's so important, I think, for people to reach and strive and have the confidence to try to do what Montessori really said we should try to do. And this is why our school has been really fun at Forest Bluff School. It was founded by my sister and my mother. They wanted to see what would happen if they really did what Maria Montessori said. And they started as an experiment with 15 children, one little classroom. They had 3 and 4-year-olds. My sister, Lynn Jessen, was the teacher. And they just wanted to see what would happen. And they didn't know if it would fail or if it would work. And what happened was they just kept seeing, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then if we do a little more, then look what happens. So my goal right now is to go around and encourage schools to just keep going closer and closer. You know, what if you didn't interrupt the children at 10 o'clock to take them to Spanish and French? What if you let them keep working for 3 hours? What if you didn't give them grades? What if you didn't give them worksheets? What if you only worked with the materials in the classroom? I mean, people will see if they do it, that better and better results will come. So reaching the potential for us as human beings, but also striving for the potential as schools to really put this into practice and see what will happen.
Indeed. You spoke about students that have come through And you've been teaching for a while, right? You've also been part of the school for a while. And it must be amazing to see these young ones come back and tell you what they're doing, firsthand. One of the things that comes to mind for me often is Maria Montessori, 1870. She was born in 1870. And then, she's working with students as a physician. She just takes on this orphanage. And she came up with all this amazing information that we are still trying to uncover the true secrets of, right? That you just spoke about. So often we think Maria Montessori's work is old. How does it still apply in modern days now where we're talking about technology advances? So what are your thoughts about Montessori today?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. I also want to point out, I think this is really interesting to think about. Maria Montessori had to keep moving so many times in her life. She would start a school and then move on, and then that school would get closed and she'd start somewhere else. And that happened to her so much in life. I bet she rarely got to see the full results of her work. I mean, she wasn't in the same community where she could have seen these children when they were in their 20s and 30s. So I'm sure she heard stories, but I think she'd be really amazed today to look down and see what has been happening. So whenever we feel discouraged that there isn't more Montessori and why hasn't it spread more and why don't people just believe us, I think we have to remember that it's pretty incredible how much it's grown and how much more evidence we have now of how strong it is. But to answer your question, I think it goes back to what I started to say earlier, that human beings and our needs have not changed that much. When I give a talk to parents, I'll often start by asking them to think about what they think their young child, maybe 2 years old, is going to need to know and be able to do when they're an adult to face an uncertain world, a world that's changing so rapidly with technology. We just had a worldwide pandemic, so they now can picture that, so many things can happen that we cannot even predict. So it's not like, in the 40s when you were raising children and thinking, well, if my child becomes a lawyer or a doctor, they'll probably make a good living. People tried to steer their children into certain skill sets to ensure that they would have a successful and happy life. Well, that's no longer true. We really don't know what skill set, which language, which foreign language should they learn? What type of math? And these types of math just are crazy. What type of math? What kind of reading program is going to be most successful? We really don't know. And so those things are all a gamble. How is it going to turn out raising children with so much technology and on screens? We really don't know. These are experiments. The world is changing so fast. But what doesn't change is something that Maria Montessori talked about again and again and again, that is a human characteristic that makes us different from any other creature, which is our ability to adapt. She talked about adaptability. She said this is the most important thing that we can nurture in ourselves and in our children, the ability to adapt. Children are extremely adaptable because they can be born into any time, place, or culture and acquire those times and that culture, that language, that way of being. They are able to learn very quickly. The most important set of skills that we should be fostering in children, no matter where they're born, and honestly, no matter when they're born, but especially right now, is the ability to focus, the ability to engage, the desire to engage with the world around you, the ability to collaborate with other human beings and empathize with them, the ability to concentrate, the ability to organize your thoughts and organize your space, the ability to persevere, resilience. These are the same words that come up when I ask an audience, what do you think your child needs? Nobody ends up saying, I think my child's going to need a foreign language, or I think my child's going to need to be able to compute mean, yes, we want them all to learn basic math and things that are part of our culture, but people really realize that the inner skills, those life skills, those what some people call soft skills, are the most important thing. And those will be used and those will be attributed and those will be connected to anything that a human being is going to need to know how to do and is going to tackle in their lives. And honestly, that was true decades ago and centuries ago, just as it is now. I mean, early humans needed these skills too. And the beautiful thing is that they're natural for us to develop. These skills and these abilities and these traits are natural human characteristics. School and education and our parenting can either foster these characteristics and help them to grow stronger and stronger, or suppress them, one or the other. The older I get, the more I feel that a lot of these characteristics are really suppressed in conventional schooling. The ability to come up with original ideas, the desire to engage with your work. So much of that is without meaning to suppressed, without meaning to be suppressed, is being suppressed in conventional schooling. It's really time for people to move on. The thing that makes me, I know you're going to ask this, so I'll just jump into the thing that makes me have hope for the future is that I do think educators are realizing this. I do think that more and more people are seeing that we need to free up human energy in classrooms for good things to happen.
One of the things that comes for me when you were just speaking, the joy that the child has for themselves, about their community, about learning, that is developed in a Montessori classroom, or it's allowed. And allowed is not probably the word that I want to use, but it fosters that.
Yes.
So Montessori classroom is like a workplace in action, or these busy bees at work. And what are some of the ways Montessori classrooms offer inclusion? Because we have this notion of children and bullying, but we can see completely different aspects in a classroom.
I think children do, if the environment is positive and if the adults in the room are positive and modeling very positive and supportive behavior, I think that children work things out between themselves much better when they're left to do so. And they really do start to respond to what feels good with someone else and what doesn't. They work out their social issues and they accommodate each other and support each other and help each other in a much more natural way. As you say, I think it's very much a part of human nature. You know, Maria Montessori, I've noticed when I've read her work, she often quotes William James. I think it's William James, an early psychologist or philosopher. And he was perhaps one of the first positive psychology writers. And I think and Rousseau was a little bit this way too. I think that Maria Montessori really saw human beings are basically good. And that might have come a little bit from her experiences, her positive experiences with religion, that human beings are basically good and that we need to foster those behaviors and that nature rather than punish and, be punitive with children to get them to behave well. In terms of inclusion, in terms of their joy, I think when they're able to live in a positive environment, you see a lot of really good things come out of them. Also, you see these spontaneous moments of a child just sort of, skipping across the room on their way to get their work, or singing to themselves, or just, looking happy. It always amazed me when we'd have a vacation from the school. One of the things we do at Forest Bluff School is the head of school traditionally opens the door in the morning to let everybody in. We try to let the teachers get ready in their classrooms up to the last minute. And then we go and open the doors. And the children just practically run down the hallway. They're so enthusiastic about coming into the building and getting to their classroom and getting right to work, whether they're, really little or an adolescent. And it is really amazing because you think about, I remember going to school and you've got your backpack and you're sort of trudging along and you're looking forward to seeing your friends, but you weren't that excited about the day, the whole day. Montessori children are excited about their day because it's their day. It's their work. They have something in mind that they want to do. And you think of us as adults, sometimes they'll explain to parents, it's a little bit like, if you go to work and you've got projects you're working on that you're excited about, especially if the project was your idea, it's very different than going into work to fill out a list of tasks that you've been given by somebody else or they're just checking off. And that right there is the difference between conventional education and Montessori. So which would you prefer to spend your time with? And which one's going to bring out the best in you? And which one are you going to put the most effort into?
One of the unique aspects of a Montessori program you and I were speaking about earlier is that each environment is set up for the needs of that particular age group. And you just spoke about the elementary child, the adolescent child. Montessori is not just in some countries, speaking Montessori means for very young children, but Montessori goes all the way up to high school. And, it's a lifelong learning. Would you mind sharing a little bit about how these environments are a little bit different?
Yes, it is really one of the greatest gifts, I think, that Maria Montessori gave us was to point out the differences in these stages of development. The children need different things at different stages. So in the period between birth up to age 6, it's a stage of the child forming themselves as a child. So it's kind of the foundation of your life. And we know that rapid brain development is happening. Rapid physical development is happening. It's a vulnerable time. Because of that, children tend to get sick a lot when they're very young and build up their immune systems. And so the environment that's suitable for them is one that helps them to develop their independence, their autonomy, their ability to do things for themselves, their physical movement, developing hand-eye coordination, their ability to communicate, so language, lots of vocabulary acquisition during those years. So you're going to see an environment that encourages children to develop their ability to concentrate and be able to focus a little bit on themselves. And that's not what it would appear to be if you walked into a Montessori classroom because all the children are interacting and they're children 3 years of age in the same classroom. So 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, sometimes 6-year-olds as well in the same classroom. So you see all of that happening, but you'll see these individual tables and rugs where children are really working on their own work for the most part. As they get older and they're 5 and 6, they start to do some work together, but usually an adult is there to guide them on how you do this. Around age 6, Montessori saw some dramatic changes happen, physical changes and emotional, mental, and social changes at the same time. So children tend to lose their teeth. Their hair thins out. They lose some of that baby fat. Their limbs get longer. They don't get sick as often. They kind of develop a toughness about them. They become almost obsessed with other people. They're not so interested in themselves anymore in their own project. They want to work with other people. And if you remember being in elementary school, you remember you loved being on the bus or at lunch or recess when you could talk with your friends. And this is a natural urge that Maria Montessori recognized and thought, okay, there must be some natural reason for this. There must be some learning purpose to this characteristic. So instead of fighting it, let's encourage the children to work together and help them learn to collaborate through working together and learn about social life and learn about morals and how we should treat each other and decorum and so on with each other. So in elementary classroom, ages 6 to 12, you're going to see tables that have, 4 to 6 children can sit at a table together. You're going to see them doing projects where these big pieces of paper laid out all the way across the floor, and they've got these big long-term projects going on together. They're drawing and they're writing, they're bringing in all of the materials they need to do a project. They're getting them from different places. So they're learning to be resourceful. whereas the younger children have a tray that has everything you need to do an activity right there on it, so they can focus and they can understand the process and the sequence. These children now they understand that they can be internally organized. So now they need the opportunity to find things. I've got to go get the scissors. I want these colored pencils. I'm going to get this material. I'm going to get this friend. I'm going to go get these books for this. And they can start to synthesize information in their minds. So it's a much more abstract way of learning, but they're still using materials to build towards that abstraction. You're going to hear more talking in an elementary classroom. You're going to see a different energy level. It just feels very different. It was fun for me because I taught primary 3 to 6 year olds and then 6 to 9 year olds, and going back and forth between the two rooms. It's just dramatic. Very quiet with the younger ones. They're concentrating. The older ones can concentrate and have a lot going on at the same time. Around age 12, and these aren't exact ages, but these stages that every child goes through, this transformation, basically around age 12, where their bodies are changing in obvious ways. We start to see adolescent puberty happening. They tend to be more emotional. They tend to get sick more often again, the way the very, very young children do. And Montessori explained this as the child has built a child, and now the rug is kind of pulled out from underneath them. They now have to start all over, not completely over, but they really need to start over and build an adult. And when you think of it that way, it really helps you to understand why middle school is such a tender and vulnerable stage of life. And they need a lot of support again, just like they did when they were an infant. It just looks very different now. The adolescent is going to have an environment that is very nurturing, supportive. The model that we have taken at our school is a smaller group, actually, so that there's more adult attention. They can meet privately with their teachers and be part of a group. It's almost like their tribe, their group of students. They travel together. They go out into the adult world. They need to be welcomed to the adult world and to adult tasks and be honored and treated with dignity as young adults. So have the support, but also the freedoms and invitation to do adult-like work out in the world. So you should see, actually, contrary to what we do in our culture, a slight easing up of the academic pressures because they need a little time. Their minds don't work as well, actually. Their brains are changing so rapidly. It's very difficult, again, to concentrate. They're more self-centered. They think everyone's looking at me. Everyone's looking at my pimple. They're having really strong feelings. It's a time for helping them, inviting them to express themselves through poetry and art and drama. And coming into the adult world, they still need to be doing their math and language and science and so on. But we want to ease up just a little on the sense of pressure with that and allow for time for this other development to happen. And then you get the whole child being supported, and you actually see that they have more energy and ability to concentrate on the academics because they can go do some physical work, maybe cook for the class, do something else, and then come back to the academic work. So those are some of the environments you're going to see and the differences between them. As the adolescents get older and they become more stable and more outgoing and more adult-like, we want to open up, those high schools, open them up to getting them out more and more into internships, apprenticeships, doing more adult work. For college age, for university age, Maria Montessori really seemed to feel that the way we have university is very suitable, that young people seem to be able to make their own decisions, to learn more abstractly and listen to a lecture, and seem to be well satisfied in that kind of environment. Those are what Montessori referred to as the 4 planes of development, the ages 0 to 6, young childhood, 6 to 12, childhood, 12 to 18, adolescence, and 18 to 24, young adulthood. With maturity, she believed, being reached at around age 24, which is fascinating because now that we have MRIs and we know more about how our brains develop and so on, we see that in your mid-20s is basically when we mature into adults. So she saw a lot of these characteristics and changes and needs in these stages just by observing, which is pretty incredible, not by doing research and not by seeing inside people's brains, but it'll be interesting to watch as science keeps revealing that these things really do happen. So those are the environments.
Oh, beautifully explained, Paula. I could keep listening to you for hours. And one thing that for sure that in traditional education, we keep having different ways of educating our children. After pandemics in some of the states, in California, we're noticing that now children are much earlier entering public schools. We even have high schools that must have early childhood center. And I think it's done to support the parents and their needs and not truly looking at the children's needs. So listening to you today makes perfect sense. A K through 12 teacher who's educated for those developmental stages, but not really for the developmental stages, for the academics, is not ready to be able to take care of a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old. So as our governments, as a huge advocate for young students, I really strongly urge parents to speak to their assembly members, their senators, and get Montessori education. There are charter schools out there, and it's easy for us to be able to implement some of these things into the traditional education. And I was just speaking to trainers from India. There are training centers worldwide where, after listening to you, I would want to go back. And I am a 3 to 6 trained primary guide or teacher. And after listening to you, I wonder so many others would want to become teachers, and they can look up Association Montessori International's website, and they have a variety of training centers worldwide, including every continent that I know of except for Antarctica. So looking at the training center would be really great. And
Yes.
as you were speaking, Paula, one of the things that I wonder is if you can share an encouragement about Montessori education with Montessori educators or parents, what would that be? What would you say to them?
An encouragement.
Yeah, a piece of advice or something about taking that first step, being a guide for the first year in a Montessori classroom, or perhaps a parent who is like, I don't know, I want, but I don't, this is so new to me.
Yeah. I think in my book, I use the term pillars, kind of 3 pillars that I invite people to think about to understand Montessori as a framework. The first is the environment. The second is the adult who models and prepares the environment. And the third is a balance of freedom and responsibility. And what I would say in answer to that question is that the middle, the adult, is really key. We're always modeling. And the longer I have been talking with parents, and as I've gotten older and older, and the parents I'm talking to have gotten younger and younger, the more I find myself saying, we can really overthink all of this by focusing so much on our child. And I think there is so much stress in our culture and our society right now to focus on the children. Be a better parent, spend more time with your child, really get involved in everything, be right there. And we know, you and I, from being educators, that's not necessarily going to be positive. What we do need to think about is ourselves. So I find that I say to parents more and more, stop focusing so much on your child and focus more on yourself. Because if you are modeling well, if you are demonstrating how to live a happy life, if you are demonstrating how to calm yourself down when you're upset or scared, if you are demonstrating how to take a positive attitude about something, how to recover from a mishap, or, just how to react to something, they're watching you, they're soaking that in, you're their biggest teacher. And for us as teachers and as parents to just remember that's the most powerful way of teaching is being. Life is so complicated and there's so many stressors and there's so much going on. If we can just do that one thing, it will make a huge difference. It's just, we had a parent panel at Forest Bluff the other night, and I wasn't able to be there, but I did invite each of these parents to be on the panel. And so I was very excited to hear their voices in a recording afterwards of what they said. And I'm going to post it so that everyone can listen to this, because one parent said at one point, someone said something like, do you have any, lasting advice or something like that? He said, stop worrying so much. And everybody laughed because, of course, he was in their shoes just, a couple decades ago. But it really is true. We are stressing and worrying so much, and the children are becoming anxious, and the children are having more and more and more problems. And when the adults around them are calm, you can think more clearly. The answer comes more clearly to you. It's interesting, Adele Diamond, who does a lot of studies with executive function in children, she points out that you cannot think well when you're stressed. To be able to think, you need time and you need to be calm. And that's what we hope to give our children in a Montessori setting, whether it be at home or in a classroom. Time to think through your thoughts, to make a decision, to act with intention, to concentrate on what you're doing. So the biggest piece of advice I would have is to focus on yourself, calming yourself down, modeling, be the person that you would like to see your child be something like someday. And then it will happen. It really does happen that way because nature set it up to happen that way. But if I can say one other thing, Yogi, it would be, if I only had one piece of advice for parents of what not to do, it would be keep them away from screens. Keep children away from screens. We cannot emphasize that enough. I feel that I keep seeing perfectly wonderful children with well-designed brains ready to go. And then it's like they get put through this blender of images and overstimulation with screens for a few years, and out comes a totally different being that's really difficult to work with. Just don't do it. People will never regret not putting their children in front of screens. They may regret putting them in front of screens. So that would be my parting word. Keep them away from screens. Have them live next to you in the real world, collaborating with you, and invite them to do things with you. Cooking, cleaning, whatever you're doing, ask them to join you, because that's how human beings learn.
Absolutely. And Dr. Adele Diamond will be on our podcast in March. So I'm looking forward to just asking her anything and everything, because she's a huge researcher and she definitely supports Montessori education.
She's amazing.
Paula, she's awesome. Paula, can I see the book that you have written? So others, if they're looking, this is the book that we had in our school library, and we still do. And the Montessori Potential. It's for every parent and every child. And thank you, Paula, for writing this book. And can you tell us one favorite part of your book? I bet you maybe have all of them that are favorite, but is there anything that in particular that was like, wow, when I wrote this, I thought?
I guess I would say I don't really have a favorite part anymore, but I would say that when I was writing it, I kept insisting that we needed to put in stories of real children. I had this journal, and then in my mind, I had so many stories and anecdotes and experiences I'd had that I believed would bring it to life for people. But I had this journal where I had written down word for word little things they had said and done. And I wanted to share that because I really believed I haven't seen that much. I really haven't seen people bring to life the stories. I've heard all the stories. I've seen the stories. But I thought that would be the most powerful way to help people understand not only that these are real children and they make mistakes and are confused about life and, have struggles and all of that too, just like any child, but that these amazing things happen in Montessori classrooms. So I would say the chapter where I give those stories, and then all throughout I put anecdotes as much as I could so that while people were reading information, every couple pages they'd get to a story, and then every couple pages they'd be in another story, because I wanted it to read, a little bit more like a novel, the feeling of like this is real, and help people picture it and just bring up all those emotions and thoughts of their own. And so I hope I was able to do that with the book. And so that was something that was really important to me. I didn't want it to read like an academic book or just a nonfiction information book. I wanted it to be full of life.
It was definitely relatable and educational and empowering. So I definitely appreciate you being here and speaking about Montessori. There's so much that we did not discuss, and there's never a time, but an hour to share all the information you have would be truly helpful for both parents and caregivers. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you so much, Yogi. It was really fun. It was an honor to be with you with all of your experience. Thank you.
Thank you.